Welcome to this GCSE revision session. In this session, we're going to look at the heart and circulation, and this is session 2 in our series for this academic year. I'm Mrs. Kavanagh, and I'm from Connors Quay High School. So let's have a look at the programme for these revision sessions over the next coming sessions. So session 1 with Mr. Cobb, we looked at plant and animal cells. This is the heart and circulatory session, which is session 2. The next session will be on plants and photosynthesis. And then finally, session 4 will be on cell transport with Mr. Cobb. So let's have a look at what we're going to look at in this session then on the heart and circulation. So we're going to have a look at how the heart is supplied with blood. We're going to understand how blood flows to and from the heart and other organs. We're going to be able to label the various parts of the heart and know the path that blood takes through our heart. We're also going to look at the function of valves within the heart and also within our blood vessels, and also explain that term double circulatory system. So first of all, some questions to start with to see what we know about the heart already. And at any point in the film where you feel that you want to spend some time making some notes or make your own diagrams to support your learning, just pause the film and use that time to go through what work you want to do. So our first question asks us, what blood vessel supplies blood to the heart muscle? Is it the coronary artery or the pulmonary artery? So pause the film and write down your answer. Let's have a look. The blood vessel that supplies blood to the heart muscle is the coronary artery. Let's look at our second question. What does the heart muscle need from the blood? Does it need oxygen and glucose or carbon dioxide and water? Again, pause the film. Write down what you think. Glucose. And our third question, why does the heart muscle need oxygen and glucose? Does it need it for digestion or for respiration? It's for respiration. So let's move on. We're going to start by looking at blood vessels. So a reminder that this section of work here is relevant for those of us in year 10, whether it's double award or for triple award for biology or for double award science. So this diagram first of all shows us the structure of the artery and the structure of the vein. And you can see here that the artery is coloured red for the purposes of carrying oxygenated blood, just to help us remember that. The vein is coloured blue because it carries deoxygenated blood. And inside the artery, we can see that it's got tough walls here, it's very thick walls, but also flexible here, elastic, to enable that movement of blood under high pressure. So it enables the artery to be flexible as that blood flows through under high pressure. The vein, here you can see, doesn't have as full an elastic membrane, so it's not quite as flexible as the artery. Blood isn't flowing under high pressure in the vein. But what the vein does have are valves. And they are very important, and we will look at these in more detail as we go through this session. But they stop flowing the blood from flowing backwards and act like a little gateway that stops that from happening. So they're very important. So this first diagram shows us the arteries in our head and our neck, and you can see how branched they are and how important they are in transporting oxygenated blood, certainly here around our brain and other parts of our head and neck area. Similarly, we have a network of veins that are collecting deoxygenated blood in order to return that to our lungs to collect oxygen. So this diagram shows us a section through an artery. And we can see that it's made up of a number of different layers. And here we have our outer cell here, 1 cell thick membrane. But we can see that it enables that blood to flow through very quickly and efficiently. And the main artery in our body is the aorta. And you can see here how the aorta starts off in the heart, and any oxygenated blood will travel from the aorta through what we call the aortic arch, this archway here of the aorta, to different parts of our body. And we can see it's a very thick artery that runs through most of our body and then branches off depending on various organs there where it needs to reach. And here we can see on this sideways view of the aorta here how it leaves the heart and how it travels and how it is aligned with our spine there and just branches off to various organs where we want it to deliver oxygenated blood. And these two diagrams show our circulatory system. So we can see here our arteries and how they are transporting oxygenated blood. So here's our aorta that we've seen, how that is transporting oxygenated blood around our arms to our kidneys, for example, and to the rest of our legs and also to the head area, which we saw earlier. Here we've got our veins that are collecting deoxygenated blood and bringing that back up through the vena cava, which is our main vein, into the heart. So it can then return to the lungs to collect oxygen, and then that journey continues. So we'll look now at the structure of veins. And as you can see, compared to the artery, they are quite different in structure. So you can see very simple in terms of their structure inside there through this cross section. And what veins have that makes them very different to the artery are these structures here inside them, and they are valves. So as blood is returning to the heart in a vein, it runs through a valve, and these valves act as little gateways to stop the blood from flowing back where it's come from. So we can see here that as our blood flows into the vein, the valves enable it to open and the blood to travel through. Then once that blood has gone in, the valves close like a little gateway, and that stops blood flowing backwards. And we can look at that in a little bit more detail in the next series of diagrams. So we can see that valves run along a vein at various points along the vein. And here we can see that as they are surrounding this muscle or organ, that we can see the pattern that blood flow is taking through the vein surrounding this organ. So that eventually blood travels from one section up to the next as each set of valves close and enable that blood to move off. Our third type of blood vessel is a very tiny blood vessel, and these are called capillaries, and they are very important in terms of where blood is exchanged, whether it's gas exchange that takes place with oxygen and carbon dioxide, for example, in the lungs, but they may be found capillaries surrounding organs, for example, and you can see here they are very, very tiny blood vessels, just 1 cell thick. And here we can see how capillaries form around part of our body. And what we've got here are small or smaller arteries called an arteriole and smaller veins called a venule. So as we've got our large arteries, they gradually get smaller and become arterioles. And then as our veins get smaller, they become venules until eventually they become capillaries. And capillaries are only 1 cell thick. They are very, very small, but enable that exchange of gases to take place very efficiently. So let's move on now and look at the structure of the heart and how blood may flow through our heart. This diagram shows us the external view of the heart. And we can see here our blood vessels surrounding the heart, or the cardiac muscle that the heart is made from, but also some of the important arteries and veins that our heart needs in order to get that blood flowing from one area to the next. As we look through the heart, and this is something that you may be familiar with if you've carried out a heart dissection, we can see here again on the outside we've got some of our important veins and arteries that are transporting either oxygenated or deoxygenated blood to wherever it needs to go. We've got our blood vessels around the outside. As we move inside to the heart, we can see the chambers, 4 chambers that make up the heart, with their valves in between that enable, like we saw in the veins, that enable that blood to not flow back to where it has come from. We can see here the muscle wall and how that left side is thicker because it is pumping blood around our body. This is our right side that is thinner because it's pumping blood just to our lungs. In the middle here is the septum, which is a divider between both sides of our heart so that our blood doesn't mix, our oxygenated and deoxygenated blood doesn't mix. So this diagram is very important, and it's something that you may want to pause the video and make some notes on to make sure that you know the structure of the heart and all of the parts in it and also the function of those parts. So let's just run through them. So here we've got the aorta, which is the main artery in our body that is taking oxygenated blood around our body. Here, this is called the aortic arch, this particular part of the artery. We've got the pulmonary vein here, the left atrium and the left ventricle. We've got the right ventricle and the right atrium and the vena cava, and then finally the pulmonary artery taking blood to the lungs. Okay, so we can have a look at this in a bit more detail. Here we've got deoxygenated blood. So this is blood that has been brought back to the body, back to the heart from the body through the vena cava. So deoxygenated blood comes into the heart through the vena cava into the right atrium, and we'll look at these steps in a little bit more detail. And then it leaves through the pulmonary artery to go to the lungs. So anything that you see that has the word pulmonary refers to the lungs. So that blood that's deoxygenated comes in through the vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery, picks up oxygen there, and then comes back through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium, left ventricle, and then out through the aorta around the body. Okay, so this is just a step-by-step series of diagrams now that will show us what happens. So here we've got our deoxygenated blood arriving into our heart. Notice here that the valve is closed, and that's the tricuspid valve. Similarly here, oxygen-rich blood is entering our heart and our bicuspid valve is closed there. So that stops blood from going anywhere else until we are ready for that to happen. In the next step here, our valves have opened, so our deoxygenated blood is able to fill in the ventricle. Similarly, our oxygenated blood can move from the atrium to the ventricle. And you can see there the valves are open and those chambers are full and ready for the next step. And we can see there that as the heart muscle is contracting, it's pushing that blood. Here our oxygenated blood is leaving to go around our body, and here our deoxygenated blood is leaving to return to the lungs so that it can offload that carbon dioxide and collect oxygen and come back into our heart through the pulmonary vein. And this is a diagram. Now you might see something like this in an exam question, and we can use this to describe our circulatory system as being a double circulatory system. So if we look at our labels here, the vena cava, which is returning deoxygenated blood to our heart, and we can see that it's going into the upper chamber here, into the atrium, into the ventricle, and then it will leave through the pulmonary artery to go to our lungs. Similarly then, our oxygen-rich blood is coming into the heart through the pulmonary vein and then out through the aorta. So this idea of a double circulatory system refers to this, that we've got some blood that is going around our body in one system, and then we've got the deoxygenated that is coming back to the heart and going to the lungs, and then that is coming back into the heart. So we've got two parts to our circulatory system. So let's just pause for a moment and have a look at some questions just to summarise what we know so far. At any point where you want to pause the film and have a go at the questions and then restart the film again. So first of all, what blood vessel supplies blood to the cardiac muscle? And that's the coronary artery. And the substances that it supplies us with, that's oxygen and glucose. And then the valves in the heart. So how many valves are there and can you name them? We've got 3 valves. We've got the tricuspid and the bicuspid and semilunar valves. So you need to make sure that you are able to label those, and also remember that they prevent backflow or blood flowing backwards within the heart in the same way that valves operate within a vein. And then the veins, how many veins are connected to the heart? What are the names of them? And what do they do? We've got the vena cava and the pulmonary vein, and they bring blood back into the heart. Moving on, we've got 2 arteries. We've got the aorta, pulmonary artery, and they're taking blood out of the heart, transporting that around our body. And then the number of chambers that the heart has, we've got 4 chambers, atrium and ventricle on the left side, and atrium and ventricle on the right side. So moving on to look at cardiovascular disease. This is something that is on both the double award and the triple award for science and for biology. For double award, we need to know about cardiovascular disease and how it is caused and possible preventative measures, but for triple, we need to be aware of some of the treatments of cardiovascular disease as well. So here is a diagram of our artery, and we are familiar with this. Here we've got cells plus our thick artery wall. But here, what is happening is a build-up, something called an atheroma, and that's a fatty build-up, sometimes called a plaque build-up. And as you can see, it is stopping the blood from flowing as well as it could do. And here we can see on this other diagram here of our artery, here of our blood vessel, that this part here is where our blood would flow, but that area is reduced because here we've got the atheroma that has formed. So already we know that blood is flowing under high pressure here under our artery. So think about what is happening as that area is reduced where blood flow is. So that means that blood flow is pressurized, it's under high pressure in an artery that has got an atheroma buildup. And we can treat this by taking medication. So you may have heard of statins that might be able to help with that. But also here, we can insert something called a stent. So if we look at this artery here, we've got our atheroma buildup here at the top and the bottom. And this shows the process of inserting a stent here in between these two atheroma plaque buildups. And then once that is removed, that mechanism, you can see that the stent is in place, but it's opened up to become quite a wide artery now, and how that atheroma there is much reduced so that blood can flow more effectively and efficiently. So let's have a look at what we've seen so far and put that into some practical application by having a look at some exam questions. So these are all past paper questions, GCSE past paper questions that relate to the heart or circulation, and always good to have a practice of these and just have a look at the mark scheme and see how you're getting on. So at any point, pause the film. So the heart is part of the circulatory system. Name one substance transported by blood in the circulatory system. So this is a 1 mark answer. One substance transported by the blood. And here we could have any one of these answers, whether it's glucose, oxygen, carbon dioxide, urea, hormones, water, or products of digestion. And then the second part question, what is the main type of tissue in the heart wall? And that is cardiac tissue. Our second question here is a very simplistic looking diagram of the heart and the structure of the heart. And we've got 5 labels here that we need to be aware of in order to answer our question. So our first question is asking us which blood vessel, A, B, or C, takes blood to the lungs. So that's a case of us just writing the letter, and in this case it's B here. And then name parts D and E in the diagram, and that's the left atrium and the left ventricle. Similarly, our next question, again we've got A, B, C and D labelled, but we've now got words here that we need to label to help us to label A, B, C and D. Okay, so let's have a look. A is the artery, or an artery. B is the ventricle. C is the atrium. And D is a vein. And then looking at question 4. So what we've got here, we've got a diagram or a series of diagrams looking at how an atheroma builds up. So here it's telling us that one of the causes of this is high cholesterol that may cause a blood clot to form. So in the first diagram here, we've got a normal artery. And we can see here that blood would flow uninterrupted. There is no issue here. Very smooth here inside the artery. Thick walls, no issue at all. As we move down and look at the second diagram, we can see that there is an atheroma forming in the artery. So if we look towards the bottom here of our artery, the atheroma and fatty deposits are building up, various heights on the bottom there, but also on the top here. And if you look at this part here where our blood would flow, it's very, very narrow compared to our normal artery here. So we know that blood flow would not be as efficient as it could be. Then in our third diagram, here a blood clot has formed in the artery. So if we look here, this is our blood clot and the artery has become blocked. So where our atheroma has formed, that has stopped the blood and so it has become blocked here. So we've got some questions to answer relating to these diagrams and also relating to our own knowledge of this. So our first question asks how an unbalanced diet and lack of exercise could lead to an atheroma forming. And there's some key terms here and words that we need to include that the examiner has highlighted. So either high fat or high carbohydrate or too much fat and carbohydrate in our diet. That's the first point that we need to make sure we have. And then secondly, because there is a lack of exercise, that this person is not very active, then the excess fat that they are eating in their diet is not being used as energy. And that's the crucial word there. Make sure that you include energy for that. Then B, name a group of drugs which reduce the chance of build-up of fatty deposits in our arteries. They are statins, and we mentioned that earlier. And then thirdly, explain how an atheroma may lead to a heart attack. So we need to explain that it might cause a clot to form or a blockage in the coronary arteries, and then that prevents oxygen or oxygenated blood from reaching the heart muscle. Very important to include that word muscle. Remember, it's asking us about a heart attack here. So we need to make sure that we are linking that word muscle back there to the heart. Okay, so just some questions to finish off with. And obviously pause this at any time that you want to. So what type of circulatory system do we have? Do we have a single circulatory system or a double circulatory system? And we have a double circulatory system. Remember, we talked how blood travels around the body from one part of the heart and then travels from another part of the heart to the lungs. What feature of the heart prevents backflow of blood? Is it the valves or is it the coronary artery? It's the valves. And remember, we have valves in the heart and in the veins as well. Thirdly, where does the blood go when it leaves the pulmonary artery? Does it go to the lungs or does it go around the body? It goes to the lungs. Well done if you got that. Remember, we talked about anything that refers to or uses that term pulmonary refers to the lungs. What type of blood exits the heart through the aorta? Is it deoxygenated or oxygenated blood? And it's oxygenated. Very good if you got that. Which side of the heart has a thicker layer of muscle? Is it the left side of the heart or the right side of the heart? And it is the left side of the heart, approximately 3 times thicker than the right side of the heart because it's pumping blood around the body from the left side, whereas the right side isn't as thick because it's pumping blood to the lungs. And our next question, what is the heart made of? Is it made from muscle or is it made from bone? And it's made from muscle. What type of muscle is the heart made from? Is it made from cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle? And it's made from cardiac muscle. So remember, cardiac muscle, if you remember that term cardiac arrest, anything to do with that term cardiac refers to the heart. And then a reminder of our valve names. So in the left atrium, is it the bicuspid valve or is it the tricuspid valve? It's the bicuspid. And our right atrium, it's the tricuspid valve. So thank you for your time and in this session, and next time we'll be looking at plants and photosynthesis. See you then.